Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a moment in time that literally rewrote the future of an entire continent. I'm talking about January 1788, when the 11 ships of the First Fleet dropped anchor in Port Jackson. Now, this wasn't just a simple docking of boats. It was a profound, unprecedented collision of two completely different worlds. We're going to objectively unpack exactly how this went down, what drove it, and the massive ripples it sent through history.
Here is our roadmap for today. First up, the catalyst. Then, the mechanics. Third, the shockwaves. Fourth, divergent lenses. And finally, the enduring legacy. Let's jump right in.
Part 1. The Catalyst, a collision of worlds.
To really wrap our heads around the magnitude of this moment, we have to look at the sheer scale of time on both sides of the shoreline. Try to picture this. For over 65,000 years, indigenous ancestors had been carefully managing and living on the Australian landmass. That is an incredibly deep, unbroken history. We're talking continent-wide trade routes, highly complex social structures, and a profound understanding of the local ecosystems. The land wasn't just inhabited, it was meticulously cared for by generations of First Nations people.
And then came 1788. On January 26th, Captain Arthur Phillip, alongside roughly 1,400 convicts, Marines, and officials, arrived to establish a permanent European settlement. This sparked an immediate collision, specifically with the local Eora nation, who had called the Sydney Basin home since time immemorial. Just think about that contrast for a second. A 65,000-year-old continuous culture suddenly coming face-to-face with 1,400 strangers from across the ocean. It's the foundation for everything we are about to cover.
Part 2. The mechanics. Causes of colonization.
Now, you might be wondering, why there? Why did the British decide to set up a penal colony halfway across the globe? Well, the surprising catalyst was actually the American Revolutionary War. When Britain lost its American colonies, they lost their main drop-off point for convicts. As a result, London's jails and those rotting old ship hulks floating on the River Thames became dangerously overcrowded. They needed a fix, fast. So they looked to this distant land, charted by Captain James Cook in 1770, as a viable alternative to relieve all that pressure back home.
But it wasn't purely about relocating prisoners. Britain was playing a high-stakes game of global geopolitical chess, especially against France. Establishing a Pacific presence gave them a strategic naval foothold in the Asia-Pacific region. This meant securing lucrative trade routes and fresh supply lines for crucial naval materials like timber and flax. Plus, there was the promise of massive economic opportunities. They saw a huge potential for farming and trade, and eventually, industries like sheep farming and wool would explode, totally transforming the global market.
Part 3. The shockwaves. Asymmetrical fallout.
While the British struggled with basic survival in the new environment, the fallout for the indigenous population was catastrophic and immediate. First up, the ecological shock. The Australian landscape was adapted to soft-footed marsupials. So, when Europeans brought in hard-hoofed livestock like sheep and cattle, they rapidly trampled and destroyed fragile native grasslands that had been carefully managed for millennia. Then, there was disease. Europeans brought unfamiliar illnesses like smallpox and influenza. With zero natural immunity, these outbreaks caused devastating population losses, sometimes decimating communities before they even saw a settler. And thirdly, the frontier wars. As the colony relentlessly pushed outward for more land, traditional boundaries were shattered, leading to fierce, violent skirmishes as indigenous groups defended their homes.
Beyond the physical toll, there was an immense cultural disruption. This displacement severely impacted traditional languages, customs, and ancient practices deeply tied to specific geographic locations. Tragically, this era also led to policies forcibly removing indigenous children from their families. This caused a massive fracture in the passing down of thousands of years of sacred cultural knowledge, storytelling, and lore from one generation to the next. It's a deep reft that communities are still working incredibly hard to heal today.
Part 4. Divergent lenses. A clash of horizons. A crucial part of this explainer is looking at how two completely different groups viewed the exact same events. First, we need to understand the British legal mindset. They operated under a Latin legal doctrine called Terra Nullius, which basically means land belonging to no one. This specific concept allowed the British to look right past a deeply inhabited continent and view it simply as a blank slate, just waiting for European civilization and laws. It was the fundamental legal fiction they used to justify the entire colonization effort.
You can really see the stark contrast in mindsets here. European eyes were trained to look for permanent fences and tilled fields, so to them, their arrival felt like a noble, civilizing mission, painting on an empty canvas. But for the Eora people and other First Nations, the land was a deeply mapped network of sacred spaces and territorial boundaries. They didn't see civilization arriving, they saw an uninvited intrusion. It was a massive, unannounced breach of protocol by strangers who were cutting down sacred trees and clearing land without permission.
When we put these perspectives side by side, the divergence is pretty staggering. Where the British saw the excitement of a brand new colony and boundless economic growth, Indigenous peoples were experiencing the devastating loss of their traditional lands and the disruption of their communities. While Britain was busy celebrating the expansion of its global empire, Indigenous Australians were forced into a position of resisting an invasion of their ancestral homelands. It really goes to show how one single historical event can hold entirely opposite meanings, totally depending on where you stand.
Part 5. The Enduring Legacy, Continuity, and Change.
To truly understand modern Australia, we have to ask ourselves, what changes overnight, and what manages to endure across centuries? How did that initial collision shape everything we see around us today?
Looking at the big picture, we see this fascinating duality. On one side, you have incredibly rapid change. In less than a century, ancient tribal governance was largely overwritten by British common law, Westminster political institutions, and a global cash-based economy. Sydney went from a tiny penal colony to a massive metropolis. But on the flip side, we see enduring continuity. Despite generations of forced removal, assimilation policies, and immense hardship, the Indigenous connection to country remains totally unbroken. Traditional ecological knowledge and ancient storytelling have shown remarkable resilience and are still being passed down today. And today, we see these two worlds constantly intersecting. We live in a society that operates within the inherited legal framework of 1788, while at the exact same time actively relying on the continuous, ancient knowledge of Indigenous custodians. A great example of this is the use of traditional cultural cool-burning fire practices to combat devastating modern bushfires. We also see it in the formal legal recognition of native title within the British-derived court system. It's a really unique blending of ancient custodianship with modern law.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final thought. Understanding both the fracture and the endurance is key to navigating Australia's future. We've seen how the events of 1788 fractured a 65,000-year-old way of life, but completely failed to break the endurance of the world's oldest continuous living culture. So moving forward, how will this complex, ongoing intersection of British legal frameworks and ancient Indigenous knowledge continue to shape the shared soil of tomorrow? Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and keep asking the big questions.